The Birmingham tech ecosystem is one of the most exciting across the UK, but it's not one without its challenges. Today, I'm going to be talking to some great experts, business leaders within the ecosystem that are going to be shedding light as to some of the challenges and opportunities to better our tech ecosystem. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Today on the show, I've got Jim Shirley, the founder of Funding Hero, one of the scale-up accelerators that we have in the ecosystem. We've got Dan Corcoran of Reedmace Talent, and they do incredible work in terms of tech talent acquisition, I would presume. And then we've got Omran Habbal, who is one of the leading business leaders and coaches and mentors in the ecosystem, the co-founder and CEO of Birmingham Enterprise Community, otherwise known as BEC. Once again, thank you for coming on the show. So you all participate in the ecosystem in different ways, and your business leaders, you talk, you facilitate sessions, and with your organizations, you actually do great work. What I want to get started with is your general assessment of the Birmingham tech ecosystem. So let's say the Birmingham startup ecosystem. Omar, we'll start with you.
Okay, you start with me. I think we, as I said, we have a great ecosystem in terms of tech. I always wonder, is it going to be a tech ecosystem always, or it's going to be something else? As to be more specific, is it fintech, or is it mid-tech or health tech? But there is a lot of potentials, and there is a lot yet to learn still. Well, the good thing, as you can see now, like we are really well connected in the ecosystem as business support organizations and individuals. And that's, I think, what matters. We were just talking about it, how good it is as a community we link with each other.
Definitely, that's definitely important. Dan, what's your assessment of the business ecosystem generally?
Yeah, well, in Birmingham, I mean, it's a big question. Don't get me wrong, but essentially, I'd echo what you were saying. The Birmingham ecosystem is very different to that of London or Manchester. And I think one of the common threads about the Birmingham ecosystem is that we do try and connect and elevate each other a lot more so than the London scene. Whilst we don't quite have the same amount of access to funding, what we do have in the Midlands, is a really strong manufacturing base. We've got deep innovation across the Midlands. I'm saying it's Birmingham, but of course the Midlands, and it's a really wide patch, and essentially we tend to have entrepreneurs, serial entrepreneurs, and people coming in with lots of experience and really driving innovation. So I think for me, the Birmingham, the Midlands ecosystem is a really exciting place. Yeah.
Fantastic. And Jim, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the way that Birmingham Tech Week, all the noise and kind of excitement that gets built from that, you can see there's something really exciting building. We've still got some way to go to catch up, with the regional hubs and stuff, but there's a huge appetite there. There's been a huge amount of funding, recently kind of put into the system as well. So I think we're looking for some really exciting things going forward. A bit fragmented still, a lot more to do. I think we can do more to kind of create a stronger funnel to help companies go up through the system. Large amount of companies, I think, struggle for those first 1 to 3 years trying to get from the ground, getting from A to B, plenty of support, but how can they get from B to C to D? That's some of the challenges I think we face over the next few years.
And I think that is a very important point to dig into the conversation, because there is no denying that there's a high level of business startups in Birmingham. We see the numbers every day. We talk about it, the highest number of startups outside London, it's widely talked about. But that is not necessarily translating into scale-ups. Yep. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think as just mentioned, it's having that funnel, that support system that companies can kind of know they can go from A to B to C and so on. You have to have a really strong pool of initial seed funding. We've got lots of money, I think, floating around at the seed stage for that kind of second round of funding, or for companies that have started to really establish a team around them. But getting to that point is really hard. And I think we've got some fantastic, exciting incubators in the region. I think B2Den, that Dan's part of, a really good example, of how they start to kind of bring founders in and start to kind of put a wraparound around them and show them how to scale. We need more like that. We need more scale-up expertise to kind of help people get to that next stage, because it's really, really tough. There's so many variables in growing a business. Most businesses will fail within the first 2 to 3 years. So how do you get them through that startup graveyard, as we call it? And that's the big challenge. So the more we can do around mentor support, improve the angel ecosystem, this will help to create a much better funnel to ultimately create scale-ups as they go through.
Fantastic. And Dan, would you say that those are some of the things that you see as possibilities to improve that, startup to scale up ratio as well?
Yeah, I think, I agree with everything that Jim's saying. He's absolutely right. The support for businesses needs to be there at the early stages. And you need to then follow that through to make sure that they can get to later stages of funding. There's also an element around the regional development and what we're doing as a region to attract startups and as a country, right? So, and there's a lot being done by West Midlands Combined Authority, other bodies where they're running initiatives to bring companies from abroad, attract investment. So it's not just about homegrown. Let's not forget that's also about attracting really good businesses to the region.
Absolutely.
Is this the right place for them to base themselves? What does the city have to offer to them, both professional and personally? Do they want to be here? And is the ecosystem thriving enough for them to want to stay here? And some cities have got that.
And so essentially what you're talking about, and what I've heard you say as well, is that support ecosystem that helps startup go from startup to scale up. And Omran, I'm going to come to you on this because you work in the business support space, and it's not like there is no business support in the region. Of course there is,
Yeah.
but is it what it needs to be? And the crux of this conversation today is identifying better ways for our ecosystem to thrive. So from your perspective, and you could piggyback off some of the things that Dan has said, or you could go however direction you want to, but from your perspective, what does that support infrastructure in the region need to look like in order for us to become what we need to be as an ecosystem and get to where we need to get to?
I think, as I said, we don't have problems with having businesses starting in the region. As I said, we have a highest number, but we all know that within 10 minutes you can incorporate a business, and then that goes into that statistics of we have a business in the region, but that could mean nothing. I think we need to be more critical in supporting the early stage businesses, because there is now the atmosphere of just a start. But okay, what's next? We need to start telling people that it's not the right thing to keep moving from a business support accelerator to another accelerator, to another incubator, to another co-working space, because you would see the same business sometimes moving around
the circuit.
Business, within the same ecosystem. And the thing is, we celebrate those businesses. It's great to celebrate them, but we need to acknowledge that, okay, we need to focus on those that actually can get the ecosystem, can listen to the advice, and can move forward, not just move around. But move forward. And I think that's where we need to do more to ensure survivability and the growth of the businesses that actually deserve it.
And that comes to some of the points that you raised earlier, Jim, about the interconnectedness within the ecosystem, because the things that Omran have talked about, I have actually seen it. Startups going from one incubator to the other incubator and to the other incubator. How do we connect the dots? And I know that you've been around, you've been in the London ecosystem, you've done a bit of work in Amsterdam. From your perspective, what are the things that we're not getting right in terms of connecting and joining up the different moving parts of our ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, an ecosystem needs many parts. I think, a thriving events piece is one of them. Funding's another. The right types of business support, but the right kind of home, for the right kind of skills and niches. And one good example was I went on a tour with the Incubation Association and Accelerator Network to Amsterdam, and there was Ace Event Studios, and they basically have 35 shipping containers they've gone and bought, created a really novel space for all the AI startups from Amsterdam University to come and base themselves in. They can house approximately 450 workstations. You've got this rich pool of talent of all these young AI graduates coming in. You've got these amazing clusters, of really high-tech businesses and stuff. They've got all the skills around them. They've got the support. They've got the event system. And then they've got a venture capitalist or funders on the doorstep that as soon as something good happens, there's a term sheet. So they won't spend 2 to 3 years going around in circles figuring out, well, how do I get funding? I've got a great idea, but I can't scale it up. The system is there, sets up for them to succeed. So we have to think about how do we really set ourselves up for success. So it's very focused, very targeted. And with some of the new innovation grants that have been released by the West Midlands Command Authority, etc., that will start to make that happen. But we need to kind of do a bit quicker, really, and kind of build more of a wraparound, around certain niches to help them really thrive.
Ramp up a bit, and I think that's very, very interesting. And Dan, I know that you're involved with the Beta Den project,
Yeah.
and I know that I've had people that have gone on that program and tell me how fantastic it is. In terms of innovating business support, what else can we do that hasn't been done before?
Well, I think it's such a broad question. I mean, there's loads of things, and there's a lot of elements to it. We're ignoring the fact that actually there's an element of luck to it too. You've got to create the right conditions and then hope that the right companies come to the right place at the right time with the right ideas in order for that to be a success. And it is, let's not deny it, there's an element of luck to both business and to, incubation. But I think certainly, you mentioned Beta Den. Beta Den's a fantastic programme. It's Worcestershire's first accelerator. It's now award-winning. And the cohorts that they work with, are small cohorts. They give them really focused attention and solid funding backed with mentors. I think more initiatives, look, you're talking about venture studios, which I must admit, you don't see many of those in Birmingham and the Midlands. So there's different ways of doing it. There's a lot of support out there which is very generalist, but actually, if I was to give you one thing, and you're looking at me going, he's got a point here. So if I was to give you one thing, I think definitely specialisation, where you're talking about, AI and the different use cases, specialisation and funding in different subsectors of tech startups, such as, in the Midlands, we're big on clean tech, we're big on med tech, but focusing on the areas where we want to be more successful, and then building niche services to help those businesses and to cluster them together to connect them and to connect them with the ecosystem, I think is definitely the way forward. Yeah,
absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And from your perspective, Omran, I know that Beck does a lot of work, not just locally within the ecosystem to try to help entrepreneurs develop, but also working with several organizations to try to bring them into the whole conversation around developing the ecosystem, and also, more importantly, creating international linkages. Talk to us about the importance of innovations like that or initiatives like that in developing that ecosystem.
I think it's really important because you get that diversity and different perspectives on the support available. So in our recent project, for example, working with a Canadian business and bringing them to the region, it was an eye-opening of what is available for them in terms of, as well, public and government support that actually we can learn from. So for example, the Canadian government, if they want to come here, they're going to provide them with like the trainings, the funds to come here, mentoring, coaching, which we did with them. And it's quite interesting how they are like labeled as early stage emerging, but they are making like, let's say 10, 12 millions a year, while we give the same label for businesses in the region that are actually just kicking off.
Started.
And that creates a confusion, because I've got Birmingham Tech Week, you mentioned, so I got some VCs and angel investors from London saying that we want to come to Birmingham, seems like there's a lot of great stuff, we want to see what we can work, we don't want to miss the opportunity. And when they arrived, they got confused between celebrating the business that is just moving forward, and then there's the business that actually
Are doing
scalable, high growth,
Absolutely.
that is not actually in the spot. And that's created confusion for the international organizations and for the inward investment. But in terms of the support available, and actually to your point of specializing in certain areas. So you remember, we run accelerators, we run business support programs, but right now we are shifting more towards designing and delivering business support programs in a specific niche area. So if I'm gonna, let's say, support soft landing program, I'm not gonna do it all myself. I'm going to get who's best in the region as an organization in that area, get them involved rather
Absolutely.
than just do it myself. And I think that's a mistake a lot of organizations are doing, but we need to move towards, if, let's say, investment is not your area of expertise, okay, don't try to get there. Jim Shirley doing it, get him, you know what I mean? Get them involved and provide that holistic support from experts. And I think recently, like Beck been doing really well within this, because we are not trying to duplicate any work, and we want to just like provide the best support for whether it's local or international businesses.
I think what you've said is very important, and for me, it's one of the core pieces of solution that we need to implement moving forward. Pick a niche where you want to develop solutions on or deliver solutions on, and connect horizontally across the ecosystem to make it the best solution possible.
Exactly.
I think that is very instructive. And Jim, you know, Omran has just talked about the confusion that exists between what is startup and what is scale up and what is, you know, seed stage and what is pre-seed stage. With Funding Hero, what you've done is built an accelerator that is very specific. Tell us about the importance of that kind of model, and you can use Funding Hero as an example if you want.
Yeah, so I think my background, I went to invest in a venture here in London. We had a portfolio of 30 tech startups, and kind of watched them really struggle for that first mile. You know, how they kind of raise those first 2-3 rounds of funding. You know, tech is hard to kind of get off the ground. You know, it takes time to kind of find product market fit. That takes, you know, 2 to 3 years at least. Trying to understand the right customer base, does your actually product fit the right solution and stuff. But from a funding point of view, trying to articulate all of that to an investor whilst trying to run a business and kind of actually scale it is really, really difficult. So investors look for, you know, execution, and look for a team and stuff. And what we want to try and do is wrap around for all the founders. How do we help them think about, you want to get from A to B to C and start to think about the next few milestones rather than just thinking about the next step in front of you. And it's something that, you know, Dan's a massive advocate of from a talent planning point of view. Don't just think about, I need to hire someone next month. Think about what's my hiring roadmap for the next 3 to 4 months, and way beyond, so I need to start now so I can look for the next 2 to 3 years, for example. And funding is exactly the same. So if we can start to help founders not just think at the next round of funding, but to think 2-3 rounds ahead, then they've got a much better way to articulate that to investors, and they'll have a much better chance of actually raising investment when they come there.
Absolutely, and I think that's quite interesting. And you touched on talent really quickly there, but I want to dwell on that because I think it's one of the other areas in the ecosystem where we make a lot of, we talk a lot about it, but in terms of the practicalities, things might not always seem, you know, as they look like on the surface. And I know that, Dan, you work primarily in the talent space. It is said often that we have all these universities, I think there are about 13 universities across the West Midlands, and the amount of talent that brings into the business community. What percentage of that talent is the tech ecosystem or the business ecosystem seeing?
Well, you can't answer the question without explaining the total talent pool. So the thing about talent is, I use it in the term talent acquisition. And talent acquisition is a field which concerns itself with, as Jim rightly says, a whole bunch of activities which over a long period of time help you to attract the right talent into your business to fill predefined skills gaps.
So it's not just hiring.
No, absolutely. And that is what I want to get across, because a lot of times, you know, I even speak to recruitment professionals or talent acquisition professionals and say, what's the difference between recruitment and talent acquisition? And the truth is, recruitment is getting somebody into the business, into a predefined role. All the strategy stuff's happened. Okay, so in large businesses, you think about it, somebody leaves, you replace them. You hire somebody, that's recruitment, that's just recruitment. Talent acquisition is the long-term planning, normally to reach a predefined objective, which is where Jim and I have, you know, crossovers in the work that we do. So most startups will have, particularly for funding purposes, they'll have specific objectives and goals they need to reach. To reach those, they need certain skills in the business. The talent, the people that come with those skills are the people that actually enact that. So in essence, you can talk about university, that's great, but what I would say to you is to fill those skills gaps, which are incredibly well defined using, you know, psychological profile, all sorts of methodologies, so a proper professional approach. One talent pool may be the universities, that's fantastic, but there's a whole bunch of other talent pools. Now, if you take that into a very niche area, which we are at the moment, so we're working with, I think it's our 63rd tech startup in 4 years that we've helped to do their own talent acquisition, and we do that for them for a period of time so that they can scale to reach their objectives. So if you look at a company that's got very niche skills, so we've got, you know, companies you know, who are creating flying cars or who are creating, you know, quantum computing, for example. When you've got those really niche skills that are not currently available, university is going to be a great place for people to start out, for example, but now what you need to do is to really have a strategy over a period of time to either home grow, to find those people, to attract them to you, etc. So I know I haven't directly answered your question, but I'd say a small percentage, but then you also need to look at when they enter. Is it straight post-university, or is it later in their career and they were educated at university? So yeah, that's the thing. You've got to look at the entire talent pool,
Spectrum,
but you've also got to know where you're heading and what skills you need to get there.
But on the back of that, if you want to scale a company, you can't just hire anybody.
Yeah,
You have to have the right team, because it's all about having the real intent, because growing a company at pace is very challenging because it's constantly changing. There's all different things across the business that, something's new, something's got to go and adapt. And you have to have a team around you that can cope with that and make decisions on the fly fast. So you have to find that right balance of experience, which is expensive. So that's challenging, but also the right level of, like the level of doers, that can actually keep things moving as well. And that's, I think where having that long-term strategy, plays a massive, massive part into that, because you have to be very specific and targeted on who you want to bring into the business.
Yeah, and the big thing about that, sorry, I know you're going to do some bits, but the biggest thing about that is recruitment ignores a lot of the strategic stuff that should be in place, because it doesn't need to look at that. Its job is to fill a seat, and there is high-level methodology which can be used to identify all of those things, both on the skill side but also on the person side. So there's psychological methodology that we use. Everything that we do is data-driven, and you're making decisions for the right reasons. Whereas what tends to happen with recruitment, and you know this, and both of you would have seen this, when you hire, people tend to put an advert out, they'll meet a few people and they'll hire someone, or they'll hire someone they know because they trust them. But what they don't do is go, let's look at the entire market, let's understand exactly what we need, and then let's endeavour to find that. And that's a different approach.
I think that points that you guys have put out really encapsulates what needs to be done, particularly for businesses that are at that stage where they're scaling and they've raised some capital and they're now thinking, how do I get the people to help me accelerate this? But let's also touch on the part, and Omar, I'm going to come to you on this. Let's talk about the part of the ecosystem that have not yet raised capital, but need talent.
Well,
Yeah,
I think here you would go back to the university, because it's an affordable option for those who's just starting. So previously you would go and get a student to do an internship, paid or unpaid, and you have to cover the cost for that. But right now there is bursaries where the universities would pay the student to be working with you on a project or over a certain period of time. However, you still need to educate yourself on how to do those interviews and assess the right options, because even if you are getting, like say, a student being paid by the university, there's a cost on you.
Absolutely.
Your time training them and spending with them could cost you money. It actually happened with us where we got, there was the Kickstarter's scheme or something.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think it's cost us more money than anything else that has done to us, because there wasn't that process of getting the right people to deliver. So at that early stage, universities are good. However, the university also really slow in moving and responding to the market. So we are talking about AI and all of these things. Universities are still catching up on what's going into the market and the needs that is there. So it goes into, as you've mentioned, that personal passion into developing themselves and learning about things outside the remit of the academic life. So for the early stage, I think that is, here I'm talking about the idea stage basically. That is the
what is available and possible. I'm going to come to Jim very quickly. Yeah.
I think the big thing for me is just, angels. So, the biggest call to action I can call today is how can we get more angels into the ecosystem? Because people think angel investing is about bringing money in, but actually it's first about bringing relationships. It's bringing value for their experience. We've got an incredible community of people that have kind of been there, done that, got the t-shirt. And, as startup founders, you need to surround yourself by people that have got that experience, who has got the scars and successes, of kind of on their journey. And they can make a huge, huge impact. And when money is tough to come by, value is always free. So surround yourself by people that kind of know exactly how to scale up, and they might invest. They might invest at some point in the future. But if there's anyone out there that are angel investors or potential people that can help, young startups in a specific field, please try and get involved and help them out.
Come out, and I'm going to come to that point. If you're watching this today, you've heard Jim say, and everyone on the panel, remember the conversation is not just here in the studio. You could also participate in this conversation online, on LinkedIn, on YouTube. Drop us a comment, share your thoughts around what the things are that we need to do in order to improve our startup ecosystem. So you've just touched on angels. So I want to talk about funding. Let's talk about new models or better ways of accelerating funding in our ecosystem. We've touched on it from the first question up until now. The need to make sure that the early stage businesses are funded so that they can become, scale ups and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. When you think about particularly the early stage funding landscape in the region, there is something missing. Because there are funding opportunities, we've got VCs across the region that would put money into businesses that are already doing very healthy amount in turnover. But in terms of the early stage businesses that just don't have that turnover yet, or are just getting into market, or they have very little traction, there isn't much available. From your perspective, from all of your experiences, what do you think are the things that we need to begin to do in order to make sure that there are funding possibilities for businesses that are starting up? Omran, do you want to start?
Well, I think this is the time. If I know the answer, we wouldn't be discussing this. Right? It is really hard. I think we need to start from knowing how we're going to present the businesses, the promising startups that we have in the region, and that goes back to the point that I was talking about, where we are doing the buzz right now, but we are not doing the business that actually would lead to that marketing buzz of the region.
Doing the buzz, not the business.
Exactly. So for example, if you go to London, they won't care about talking about making London good, like a hub, or we are supporting this and supporting that. But if you go to them and okay, we are planning to make the first million within this time, this is what we are doing. Talk business, don't talk about anything else. They're going to listen to it. As a result, that success is going to happen, that buzz is going to happen. What's happening in the region, actually, we are doing the buzz, but no one is doing the work that actually would lead there. So we need to start as well, first identify and properly present the promising startups that we have. We need to educate the startups of what investors needed, as what you're doing now, because now you have a lot of people asking for funding, and they are still they have nothing in place as a business. It's just ideas on papers. There is nothing in place. But with the technology that now we have, and we talk always about agility, right now, if you want to build an MVP with the AI and the low code and no code, you can build an MVP with a fraction of the cost and the time that is needed. So take that step and invest a couple of thousand. It's not a lot of money, a couple of thousands, to show that you've put the first investment before asking someone else to do it.
Absolutely.
And build a traction on it, and then get those big people coming in. And I think even the angel investors needs to be educated in the region, because there is that I'm going to only invest if the risks are close to zero, and it doesn't work this
Which is
way.
not possible for
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there is an underlying assumption there that every business should be funded, and I would argue that actually at the very early stages, my take on it, so the old model in the old days, we used to make money, and that's how we funded our business, right?
Absolutely.
So, and I think, so if you've got a deep tech business, you're building, a quantum particle accelerator. I don't even know what that is, right? Something really scientific, something really deep tech. Sure, you're going to need to throw a lot of money at that. But if you're running a services business, if you're running a simple e-commerce business, you don't necessarily need funding. So I would actually say, yes, we do need to look at how we support. We also need to look at who we support.
Absolutely.
Because what you don't want to do is set people up for a fall and encourage them for things that A, they should be financing themselves, and B, is not necessarily something that's going to add
an investable proposition.
Exactly right. Yeah. So I think that is a major thing. You do need to look at the who.
Absolutely.
And if they want to do it, I wish everybody, I love working with early stage startups of all types. Good luck to them. But for the region and for economical development, you need to look at what we're doing and why we're doing and who we're actually giving money to.
Absolutely. There's strategic perspectives that has to be applied to this. Now, Jim, I'm going to come to you because I know that this is something that you're definitely very passionate about as well. But one of the things I just want to put in there to include in your response as well is, considering all these technological options that are available to startups today, and Omran has mentioned quite a few of them, and Dan also alluded to them as well. What are the new models of building a business that startup founders themselves need to be thinking about in order to build great propositions and also investable propositions? But you could start by talking about the whole funding landscape and what we need to do in that regard.
Okay. I think the first thing is, for people who want to raise funding, there's kind of two key aspects. Are you fundable? Is the first one. Not everybody is fundable. And is your business fundable? So you've kind of got to get those two variables first of all.
So there's a difference between the person and the business. Are you fundable and is the business fundable?
Yeah, because I think some people just aren't fundable. They won't be able to work with shareholders. They might not be able to kind of actually scale a business. They've got no proof or traction of in the past of doing it. And it needs, being a startup founder needs a really, really different mindset. Absolutely. You have to be so resilient. You have to make hundreds of decisions every day. And there's some really big highs and lows you have to ride. So you have to first of all think about, am I the right person to take funding? But then marry that with, is my idea and business actually fundable as well? Because not all businesses will scale up. If you want to create a lifestyle business, that's a very different style of investment or
Absolutely.
funding requirements, something that's going to scale rapidly. So you have to think about those two things first of all. And I think, if we think about tech, one of the kind of the big mantras is kind of fail fast. So, don't spend ages, running around trying to do the same thing, just burning cash for it. Omran touched on the point about low code and no code. The rise of that happened rapidly, over several years. And that completely changed the landscape of software development because suddenly non-tech founders for a few £1,000 or over a couple of weekends could get a website spun up, a low code platform. They could get a landing page. They could start charging revenue for customers, all very, very easily. So you don't have to go and raise hundreds of thousands of pounds to prove something. And that's kind of been really exciting now because you kind of see there's a different age, of entrepreneurs. Typically an entrepreneur is around 40 years old as an average. But now, you can be in university and over the weekend you've got, a fantastic business spun up. So it's really kind of changed the landscape. And obviously we throw in AI, which is moving at such a pace, it's frightening. It's really going to change, how we all look at investment. And, from an investor's point of view, you need to be thinking about how can you start to build, a business with a real moat around it? What are your real USPs and how is it going to be defensible, against, low codes, the use of AI and stuff. And we have to embrace it, and use it. And as an investor, if I look to a founder that can show me they've gone and done something, very quick, they've tested it, they've iterated, they've learned, they've found what's the right way to kind of go. They've been resourceful, they might have used, graduates, from universities and stuff to kind of help get themselves off the ground. But then how do they surround themselves with the right experience from angels to kind of help them take to the next strategic level?
Absolutely.
So, I want to bang that angel drum again and stuff because I think it's, it can't be underestimated.
Come on, angels.
But for that first round, one of the things that I always talk about is you want to find 10 times more value than the cash you get from an angel. If an angel can give you £10,000 as a first check investment, fantastic. But you could burn that in 2 to 3 months. Their experience on what decisions to make and kind of what sales channels to go after and different things to look at from your business strategy, that's game changing. And people don't really put a value on advice. It's cheap, it's throwaway and stuff. But if they kind of flip that a little bit, then I think it kind of changes the way that younger stage companies can actually accelerate much faster.
Absolutely, and then there's also the bit around angels bringing on board their network.
I mean, again, you think someone's been in business for 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
Their network is absolutely huge.
It's got a nice little black book.
And it takes you twice as long to kind of even think about trying to get that.
Because as I said, if you were going to get just the money, right now on, we all have those online banking systems that within 5 minutes you can get $5,000 as
on a credit card.
Yeah, exactly, or 10 grand. So that amount of money you can easily get it, but the experience is the one that you need to be looking at.
Absolutely.
And when you, as I said, if as an investor, I want to see that you took a step, you took a risk yourself within your business before asking me to take a risk and invest.
You gotta have skin in the game.
Exactly. So show me that you've put in the effort. So I know that you are committed, but it's not that, because I'm not gonna come in to build you a business. You're gonna build. I'm gonna support you. So show me that you are able. As I said, it's about the founders and what what steps they can take. That's what they can show.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's been a really, really great conversation, gentlemen. But last question, right? And I'm going to have each of you answer this. We've talked about, new models of starting businesses. We've talked about what business support need to look like. We've talked about supporting businesses, funding, talent, and things of that nature. Generally speaking, from all your experiences, what other ideas have you seen from other places that you think, if we do this in Birmingham, if we do this in the West Midlands, it's going to turbocharge our status in terms of startup ecosystems across the UK, across Europe, and across the world? What are your thoughts? Start with Dan.
I'm going to start with you. What are your thoughts on that question? Because I know you're going to have some insights there. What do you think? I want to hear yours first.
That's a very, very good spin and interesting one. I think there's a lot that we can do.
Yeah.
There's a lot that we can do, particularly with things around supporting more businesses to get to the exit point so that they can then reinvest in the ecosystem. One of the big traits of all of the successful ecosystems across the world, whether it be London or New York or San Francisco or wherever it is businesses that have achieved exits at different stages, staying in the ecosystem and refertilizing the ecosystem. Yeah. I think we're not doing enough of that within the region, but that's my thought. But you're the guest. I'm going to let you get on with it.
I mean, on that point, I think about exit. So on our program, we try to reverse engineer an exit, because for me, I think when we talk about what's your big vision, it's a very open. It's kind of like, well, we want to grow a business and become 100 million turnover and become a unicorn, which all sounds fantastic. But if you can be very, very focused and say, well, by year 5, we want to be here. And to make that happen, we have to go through several different steps and milestones. We'll need these amounts of funding. We'll need these different, individual people to hire across the business, so we get our talent plan sorted out. We'll need the right mentors and support, as we need as well. And it creates real focus then, when you can think about how to kind of reverse engineer backwards. And it's something, I've been very fortunate. I've gone through 2 exits in the past, and we were both completely focused. We knew what our exit was. We knew the timeline we wanted to try and achieve it in. We knew what milestones we had to try and hit. And we just, every day, absolutely laser focused. When you can start to kind of create that as a mindset across the ecosystem, it makes a massive, massive difference. And from being part of the venture studio I mentioned in London stuff, again, that was something we did. We kind of worked with companies at a very early stage, incubate the idea, let it fail quickly and find what works, and then keep them very, very focused on the next 2 to 3 phases and stuff.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jim.
And all I was going to say is, I think, you've got the 2 things. You've got where we are now, and there's tons of stuff that we can do to improve. We're on the right path, right? Let's be honest about it. We are on the right path. But then you also have, for me, one of the things that owning a business has afforded me is the luxury of being able to do some voluntary stuff. And so I work with early stage startups, but I also work with schools, because actually, you mentioned university, but really the education starts right at the bottom when they're younger. So for the ecosystem we have right now, we can tinker, we can tweak, but essentially for me, one of the major things that we have to tackle is education system and how we educate students on how the world is changing. You go into any of the supermarkets now, I go out and talk to schools regularly, and I always say to the kids, you go into the supermarkets now, and what do you notice when you hit the checkouts? There's hardly any people there. It's all machines, and that is the way things are going. So you need to understand that the jobs landscape is shifting, and then we need to support teachers and education for the younger generations. That's my real takeaway. For now, we can make changes to what we've got, but if we really want a step change and to be the leader in the future, then we need to go right back to grassroots.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Omran, your thoughts?
I think it's building on what Jim mentioned and having that map for both the businesses or the startup starting and for the ecosystem organization, business support organizations, of knowing, okay, like if a startup started in the region, what is the journey they're going to go through? Which organization is at which stage? So even the organization it won't be confusing to them anymore. They won't be fighting over the same businesses and participants to tick boxes of we've engaged with the business. So they know that, okay, that stage is where you get involved, that stage where investment is involved, that stage where R&D is involved. That's really important for both the ecosystem, business support organizations, and those startups in the ecosystem, because it sometimes get a bit confusing. So I think having that clarity is important, and we need a lot of involvement from the big corporates and the private sector, because they are not involving as much. So now, right now, you have here like PwC, Goldman Sachs, EY, Deloitte, all of these big names. What are they actually doing within the ecosystem?
To participate.
Outside of, for example, having a public entity that's going to have a lot of regulations of who's going to be working with and what they're going to do, or a bank that's going to be, again, having a lot of regulations. We need that private sector of those basically that they build the economy. They are the ones building economies. We need them to be more involved, because I know recently they have teams to keep an eye on the new startups in their category. So if there's any new tech solutions that would benefit, they would acquire it right away. We need to encourage them to start to be more actively involved in supporting those.
And they're listening startups right now. They're listening right now. I mean, if you work in corporate Birmingham, this is a call to you to get your organization involved in our burgeoning startup ecosystem. It's exciting. There's a lot of possibilities. It's still in its growth phase, and this is the time to get in. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Very quickly, if you want to find out more about Funding Hero, where do we go?
Fundinghero.co.uk.
If you want to find out more about Reedmace Media, Talent.
Reedmacetalent.com. There you go.
Okay, and Beck?
Beckleaps.co.uk.
Awesome. Thank you very much, guys, for coming on the show today. And thank you to everyone who's joined us, who've shared, commented, and participated in conversation. The conversation continues on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and on all our social media platforms. We're not quite done yet. We still got our 90 seconds with. So stick around to find out who that is going to be with.